you are actually going to look at two of the groups. And the first thing that I noticed is one of the biggest problems in agriculture is hostile environments. And the message that you're leaving us with is that technologies may very well, that are already in development or might be coming, and they can respond to this problem. So how do we get there? How do we use them? What is needed?
This is very unfair. But before I answer your question, is my microphone on?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Let's just speak into it. Oh, that helps. I want to emphasize your point that there is so much interaction between the various groups, to the extent that Ismail Saragelden in our session actually spoke on global warming and the obvious effects it's having on drought and salinity. But how do we get there? How do we get to drought and salinity resistant crops? There isn't a magic bullet. That came through very, very clearly. It's an interrelationship between many technologies, genetic technologies, farming technologies, better tillage, better use of wattage. But almost the most important is better use of human resources. Because without people, we're not going to achieve anything. And that came through loud and clear in all our sessions.
Jennifer, may I say that for those who might be looking, pages 38 and 39 are the ones that we're looking at right now. Sorry, Jennifer, to interrupt you.
Actually, it starts on 36.
Let's look at the outcomes. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's look at points of divergence, because it's quite important to see where people have different points of view. One of the problems is the price of new seeds and the price of chemicals. Is there a trade-off? Are we going to actually pay more but get more? And that's very important in the South. The third bullet on page 37, there's too much emphasis on improved seeds and not enough on management system and soil quality protection. That came through loud and clearly in all our sessions. Unless you actually improve the environment in which the seeds are growing, your improved seeds are not going to get you very far at all. As I said in my opening statement, not enough attention is given to the impact of social structures when agriculture is reformed. What happens when small-scale farmers get eaten up by large corporations? What happens to those small-scale farmers? Do they just go to the urban areas, or do they become part of a community type of farming system? We also have to look at how to compensate the soil for overgrazing. In parts of Africa where cattle are king, there's overgrazing. The soil has to pay an enormous toll for that sort of cattle is king attitude. So let's go to the calls for action on page 38. And the first three are actually intimately linked. How to increase the levels of research and development for agriculture in saline and drought conditions, and how to seriously increase the level of public funding for projects for these areas, and how to develop drought and salt tolerant plants without diminishing their yield. That all requires money. When it comes to looking at these kinds of interventions to improve crops for drought and salinity, I'm afraid it comes a lot to what Jeffrey Sachs was saying in the beginning session. It comes to dollars. We really do need to invest in these, because it's not going to happen without dollars. Now, our friend from Kenya was incredibly interesting. She said, scientists tend to talk to scientists. We shouldn't be talking to scientists. We should be talking to politicians. If we are going to affect the policies of a country, we have to bring in the politicians. And we have to educate the politicians, because on the whole, politicians don't know what we're talking about when we talk about improved farming activities and improving seeds. We have to, as scientists, keep talking or start to talk to politicians. We also have to remember that there is a tremendous amount of knowledge on traditional crops specifically in the South. And we can't allow that to become lost. So we have to integrate modern technologies with traditional knowledge of crops.
Could I just ask you right there, Jennifer, I forgot to mention that you yourself are a professor of molecular biology at the University of Cape Town. And this brings in very much also the session where you were not chairman. But it's a very similar point that you mentioned to me was there, which is, does the South need to learn from what has worked elsewhere, for instance, in the North-South and in this area? And is this a valid way of going forward, or are there other things that you think that is very specific to the South?
Well, for a start, the South isn't the South. When I was at school, I was taught that South was south of the equator. But South now includes Egypt and Sudan and India. So it's a strange terminology, but I think we all understand what it means. It means the less developed countries. And those are the ones, coming back to my session, that have the major problems with drought and soil. But one point that was made in our session was, how can the South learn from the North? Because the North had to go through an evolution where they had small-scale farmers who then became commercial farmers. And how did they do it? Is there any history on this? What did they do? How do we learn in the South from the North who've gone from small-scale farming to large-scale commercial farms? And how do we learn what worked, what went right, and what went wrong? And I think those are the critical things that we need to learn from the North. And I'm saying to the North, help us, tell us what worked and what didn't. There's one other thing I want to bring up on the drought and sailor, and we cannot treat the soil as sterile. The soil is a vibrant environment that is filled with microorganisms, and we cannot plant plants and crops on the soil without involving the microorganisms, the fungi, and whatever is there to help, nitrogen-fixing bacteria, etc.
Would you mind saying a word on the session that was chaired by Mr. Meyer, who couldn't be with us now, called Food for the Future, about North and South? And this is on pages, the message is on page 34, and the key tracks, or the calls for action, on page 33. And this is where my question would be to you, is there something that went on in these key outcomes that is very much like the session that you chaired on the uses, the balances, the integration, the North or South, or we would say developed and developing country